She said she was too big for a human mate, but he loved her anyway, and changed everything *. The encounter. Zara Thorne stood at the edge of the intergalactic marketplace, her 7-foot frame casting a long shadow across the bustling crowd. The Nixarian woman pulled her hooded cloak tighter, knowing that even covered, her imposing height drew stares. Her people were known for their statuesque builds, but even among Nixarians, Zara was considered exceptionally tall and broad-shouldered. Another day, another credit, she muttered, adjusting the heavy tool belt around her waist. As a freelance engineer, she traveled from station to station, fixing what others couldn't. It was lonely work, but it paid well, and more importantly, it kept her moving. Staying in one place too long meant questions, connections, and eventually, disappointment. The morning crowd parted around her as she made her way to the job posting board. Humans, Centaurians, and various other species gave her a wide berth. She was used to it. Her violet skin, silver hair, and towering frame made her stand out everywhere she went. Back on Nexar Prime, the matchmakers had been brutally honest. You're too big, too intimidating. No male of any species wants a mate who towers over them. Those words had followed her across 3-star systems. Excuse me, are you the engineer? A voice called from behind her. Zara turned, expecting to see another diminutive client looking up at her with barely concealed nervousness. Instead, she found herself looking into warm brown eyes that met hers directly. The human man was tall, for his species, perhaps 6'4", with sandy hair and laugh lines around his eyes. His work clothes were practical, worn, and stained with what looked like engine oil. I'm Zara Thorne, she said, her voice carefully neutral. You posted about a malfunctioning atmospheric processor? Kai Brennan, he replied, extending his hand without hesitation. And yes, the damn thing's been acting up for weeks. My usual guy said it was beyond his expertise. Zara shook his hand, surprised by the firmness of his grip and the fact that he didn't seem fazed by her size. Most humans barely reached her shoulder, and their handshakes were often tentative, almost fearful. Where's the unit? She asked, falling into step beside him as he led the way through the market. My cargo ship docked at Bay 94. I run supplies between the outer colonies. Nothing glamorous, but it keeps me moving. He glanced at her sideways. I hear you're the best engineer in this sector. I get the job done, Zara replied, uncomfortable with praise. What's the malfunction pattern? As they walked, Kai described the processor's erratic behavior. Zara found herself impressed by his technical knowledge. Most ship owners knew just enough to turn their systems on and off, but Kai understood the underlying mechanics. You've done some engineering work yourself, she observed. Used to be a planetary terraforming specialist before I went freelance, Kai said. Lost my taste for corporate politics after my wife died in an industrial accident. The company covered it up, blamed equipment failure instead of their cost-cutting measures. The raw honesty in his voice caught Zara off guard. People rarely shared personal information with her, treating her more like a piece of equipment than a person. They reached his ship, a well-maintained but aging cargo hauler. As Kai led her to the atmospheric processor, Zara noticed how he moved through the cramped corridors without the hunched shoulders most humans adopted around her. He walked normally, confidently, as if her presence didn't intimidate him at all. Here's the problem child, Kai said, gesturing to the massive processor unit. She's been running hot and cycling irregularly for 3 weeks now. Zara knelt beside the machine, running her scanner over its surface. The readings confirmed her suspicions. A cascade failure in the thermal regulation system, probably caused by contaminated coolant. I can fix this, she said, but it'll take most of the day. The entire coolant system needs to be flushed and recalibrated. Whatever it takes, Kai replied. I'll get out of your way. Actually, Zara found herself saying, if you don't mind. The company. I could use someone to hold the diagnostic scanner while I work on the internal components. Kai smiled, and for the first time in years, Zara didn't feel like she was working alone. Growing closer 3 days into the repair work, Zara found herself looking forward to her mornings aboard Kai's ship. The atmospheric processor had revealed multiple interconnected problems, each requiring careful attention. What should have been a day's work had stretched into nearly a week, but neither of them seemed to mind. "Hand me the plasma coupler," Zara called from inside the processor housing. Her voice echoing in the confined space. Kai passed her the tool, his fingers brushing hers briefly. Even that small contact sent an unexpected warmth through her. She'd grown accustomed to people maintaining careful distance from her, but Kai moved around her with easy familiarity, as if her size were simply another characteristic rather than an intimidating barrier. "You know," Kai said, settling against the bulkhead with 2 cups of coffee, "in all my years of ship maintenance, I've never seen anyone work with such precision. You make it look like art." Zara emerged from the housing, accepting the coffee. Gratefully, "It's just mechanics, physics and chemistry working together. Maybe, but not everyone understands the poetry in it." Kai's eyes crinkled at the corners. "My late wife used to say the same thing about terraforming. She could look at a barren rock and see forests and oceans." "She sounds like she was remarkable," Zara said softly. She was. Emma had this way of seeing potential everywhere, in dead planets, in broken people, in impossible situations. Kai took a sip of his coffee. "I think she would have liked you." The comment sent a flutter through Zara's chest that she quickly suppressed. "Most people find me overwhelming. Their loss," Kai said simply. "I find you fascinating." Zara nearly choked on her coffee. "Fascinating. You're brilliant, independent, and you've built a life entirely on your own terms. Plus, you're fixing a problem that stumped 3 other engineers." He grinned. "What's not fascinating about that?" For a moment, Zara allowed herself to believe he meant it, but reality crept back in, bringing with it the echoes of every rejection, every relationship that had ended with her being told she was too much. "Kai," she began carefully, "I should probably mention that I'm not exactly relationship material. My people, they have certain expectations about compatibility, and I don't meet them." "What kind of expectations?" Zara gestured to herself. From her silver hair down to her boots, physical ones. "I'm too tall, too broad, too intimidating." The matchmakers on Nexia Prime were very clear about my limitations in the mate bonding market. Kai was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then he stood, crossing to where she sat. Even standing, he only had a few inches on her seated. "Height, Zara," he said gently. "Has it ever occurred to you that maybe the problem isn't with you, but with people who can't see past their own narrow ideas of what attraction should look like?" "Easy to say," she replied, looking down at her. "Hands, harder to believe when you've heard the opposite your entire life." "I get it," Kai said, surprising her. "After Emma died, I convinced myself I was too damaged for anyone else, too broken, too angry, too focused on running from my past. I figured I'd spend the rest of my life alone in space, and that was fine by me." "What changed your mind?" "Nothing changed my mind," he said with a small smile. "But meeting you made me realize that maybe I was asking the wrong question. Instead of wondering if I was good enough for someone else, maybe I should be asking if someone else could be good enough for me." Zara looked up at him, searching his face for signs of pity or false comfort. She found neither. Instead, she saw genuine warmth and something that looked dangerously like affection. "The processor should be ready for testing tomorrow," she said, deflecting from the intensity of the moment. "Good," Kai replied, "but I hope you're not planning to disappear the moment it's fixed. I was thinking maybe you'd like to stay for dinner tomorrow night. I make a decent pasta, and the ship's got a decent view of the nebula from the observation deck." Zara hesitated. Every instinct told her to politely decline, to finish the job and move on before things got complicated. But something in Kai's expression made her want to take the risk. "I suppose I could stay for dinner," she said quietly. Kai's smile was radiant. "Perfect, it's a date." As he walked back to his workstation, humming softly, Zara touched her cheek and found it warm. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder what it might feel like to be wanted exactly as she was. The test next evening, Zara stood outside Kai's ship, shifting nervously from foot to foot. She'd changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a simple dark green tunic that complemented her violet skin and a pair of fitted pants that didn't make her legs look quite so impossibly long. Her silver hair was braided back, And she'd even applied a touch of the shimmering cosmetic powder that was popular among Nixarian women. She felt ridiculous. "You're an engineer, not a debutante," she muttered to herself, then pressed the door. Chime before she could lose her nerve. Kai opened the door, and his face lit up when he saw her. "Zara, you look beautiful." "I look like I'm trying too hard," she replied. But she couldn't help smiling at his obvious pleasure. "You look like someone who cares about making a good impression," Kai corrected, stepping aside to let her in. There's a difference. The cargo bay had been transformed. Kai had cleared away the work equipment and set up a small table with candles and actual cloth napkins. The lights were dimmed and soft music played from hidden speakers. Through the observation windows, the Endorian nebula painted the space, around them in swirls of pink and gold. "This is lovely," Zara said, genuinely touched by the effort he'd put in. "I had to improvise a bit," Kai admitted, pulling out her chair. "Fine dining establishments aren't exactly built for people your height." It was true. The chair was a standard human size, which meant Zara's knees nearly touched her chin when she sat down. She started to stand, ready to make an excuse and leave, but Kai was already moving. "Hold on," he said, disappearing into a storage compartment. He returned with a couple of cargo containers, which he quickly arranged to create a makeshift bench, at the perfect height for her. Better, Zara settled onto the improvised seat, surprised by how comfortable it was. "You didn't have to." "Of course I did," Kai interrupted, taking his own seat across from her. "What kind of host would I be if I didn't make sure you were comfortable?" Dinner was excellent. Kai had prepared pasta with fresh vegetables and a protein he'd picked up at the market. They talked about their travels, their work, and the strange beauty of life in space. Zara found herself relaxing for the first time in months, laughing at Kai's stories about difficult clients and sharing a few of her own. "So there I was," she said, gesturing with her fork, hanging upside down in a Martian mining shaft, trying to rewire a gravity generator while wearing a full environmental suit. "And the foreman keeps yelling at me to hurry up because the miners are floating around like balloons." Kai burst out laughing. "Please tell me you have holovids of that." "I wish, though I did manage to get the gravity back online." Right as one of the miners was doing an involuntary somersault, he landed face first in a pile of ore. Zara grinned. He wasn't hurt, but his pride took a beating. "Remind me never to get on your bad side," Kai said, refilling her wine glass. As the evening wore on, Zara became aware of something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt normal. Not too big, not too imposing, just herself. Kai's eyes never left her face when she spoke, and his body language was open and relaxed. He leaned toward her when she talked, asked follow-up questions, and seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and experiences. "Can I ask you something personal?" Kai said as they finished their meal. Zara tensed slightly. "Okay. What's the longest relationship you've ever had?" The question hit harder than she'd expected. 6 months, she said quietly. "A fellow engineer named Thane. He was Centaurian, taller than most humans. I thought maybe the size difference wouldn't matter as much." "What happened?" "He took me to meet his family." Zara stared at her wine glass. "His mother took one look at me and started talking about how their grandchildren would be unnaturally large and how difficult it would be for me to find proper clothing or furniture. His father made jokes about needing to reinforce the floors." Kai's jaw tightened. "What did Thane do?" "He laughed along with them. Said I was being desensitive when I told him how it made me feel." Zara shrugged, trying to look casual. "We broke up 2 weeks later. He said he'd been thinking about what his parents said, and maybe they had a point about compatibility. He was an idiot," Kai said flatly. "Was he? I mean, practically speaking. Relationships with significant size differences do present challenges: housing, transportation, social situations." Zara trailed off. Kai reached across the table and took her hand. "Zara, look at me." She met his eyes reluctantly. "Every relationship has challenges," he said firmly. "Height, cultural differences, career conflicts, family drama. There's always something. The question isn't whether challenges exist, it's whether the people involved care enough about each other to work through them together. And if they don't, then they weren't the right person to begin with. Zara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. You make it sound so simple. The feelings are simple, Kai said softly. Everything else is just logistics. Confronting. The past 2 weeks later, Zara was still aboard Kai's ship. What had started as a dinner invitation had evolved into her helping him with a major cargo run to the Outer Rim colonies. She told herself it was just business. He needed an engineer for the challenging route, and she needed the credits. But the truth was harder to admit. She didn't want to leave. They had fallen into an easy rhythm. Mornings were spent on ship, maintenance and route planning. Afternoons found them working side by side. Zara handling the technical repairs while Kai managed the cargo systems. Evenings were for dinner, conversation, and increasingly, quiet moments together watching the stars stream past. Zara was recalibrating the navigation array when Kai's comm system chimed with an incoming message. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a stern-faced Nexarian woman with elaborately styled silver hair and the formal robes of a government official, Zara Thorne. The woman's voice was crisp and authoritative. This is Counselor Vesa of the Nexarian Reproductive Authority. Our records indicate you have been off-world for over 2 years, without filing the required genetic disposition reports. Zara's blood went cold. She hadn't heard from the NRA since she'd left Nexia Prime, and she'd hoped they'd forgotten about her entirely. You are hereby ordered to report to the nearest Nexarian consulate within 30 standard days for genetic assessment and reclassification. Failure to comply will result in the revocation of your citizenship and the issuance of a system-wide detention order. The message ended abruptly, leaving the cargo bay in uncomfortable silence. Well, Kai said carefully, that sounded ominous. Zara slumped against the navigation console. The NRA monitors all Nexarian women of reproductive age. They classify U.S. based on genetic compatibility, physical attributes, and social value. I was classified as genetically viable but socially unsuitable when I left. What does that mean? It means my DNA is considered valuable for the gene pool, but my physical characteristics make me difficult to match with appropriate mates. Zara's voice was bitter. They want me to come back so they can decide whether to assign me to a breeding program or declare me officially unsuitable and sterilize me. Kai's face darkened. They can do that. On Nexia Prime, reproduction is considered too important to leave to individual choice. The population declined drastically after the plague wars, so now everything is regulated. Zara stood and began pacing. I've been avoiding them for 2 years, but they must have tracked me through my work permits. What happens if you don't go? They'll send retrieval agents, and once they find me, I'll lose any say in what happens next. Zara stopped pacing and looked at Kai. I should probably find another ship. You don't want to get caught up in this. Like hell, Kai said firmly. We're not running from some bureaucrats who think they can control your life. Kai, you don't understand. The NRA has authority across 12 star systems. They have treaties with the major governments and enforcement agreements with the shipping guilds. If they decide I'm a fugitive, they can make life very difficult for anyone helping me. Let them try. Kai stood and crossed to her. Zara, I'm not going to let some council of strangers decide your future. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. Kai took her hands, his grip warm and steady. Do you want to go back to Nexia Prime? No. Do you want to be assigned to some breeding program? God, no. Then we fight this together. Zara stared at him, torn between hope and fear. Why would you do this for me? Because I'm falling in love with you, Kai said simply, and because what they're doing is wrong. The words hit Zara like a physical blow. No one had ever said they loved her before. Not even Thane, during their 6 months together. Kai, I know it's too soon, he continued. I know we've only known each other for a few weeks, but I also know that you're the first person in 3 years who's made me want to stop running from my past and start building a future instead. Tears spilled down Zara's cheeks. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. But this isn't just about us anymore. If we resist the NRA, they'll come after both of us. You could lose your ship, your livelihood, everything. Then we'd better make sure we win, Kai said, pulling her into his arms. For the first time since the message had arrived, Zara allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face this fight alone. "Okay," she said, her voice stronger. "What did you have in mind?" Kai smiled grimly. "I have some friends who specialize in making problems disappear. And lucky for us, one of them owes me a very big favor." As Zara looked into his determined face, she realized that for the first time in her life, someone was willing to fight for her instead of asking her to change herself to fit their world. The feeling was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "I love you too," she said, standing on her toes to kiss him softly. "We're going to figure this out." Kai promised against her lips. "I'm not losing you to some archaic breeding program. We're going to figure this out." Zara agreed, and for the first time since the message arrived, she actually believed it might be possible. Love changes everything. The abandoned space station at the edge of the Kepler system looked like it had been derelict for decades, but Zara knew better. As Kai's ship approached the docking bay, she could see the subtle signs of recent activity: fresh welding marks, updated beacon signals, and the telltale shimmer of an active defense grid. "Welcome to Haven Station," Kai said, expertly maneuvering his ship into the docking clamps, home to misfits, rebels, and people who've decided the galaxy's rules don't apply to them. 3 days had passed since they'd received the NRAS ultimatum. Kai had contacted his friend immediately, and within hours they were en route to this hidden sanctuary. During the journey, Zara had learned more about Kai's past than she'd known was possible. After his wife's death, he hadn't just left corporate terraforming. He'd exposed the company's safety violations to the media, costing them billions in settlements and regulatory fines. The legal battles had drained his savings and made him enemies in powerful places, which was how he'd ended up running cargo on the frontier. "You never told me you were basically a whistleblower hero," Zara had said when he finished the story. "I wasn't trying to be a hero," Kai had replied. "I was trying to make sure Emma's death meant something." Now, as they walked through Haven Station's corridors, Zara marveled at the diversity of beings they passed: humans, Nexarians, Centaurians, and dozens of species she didn't recognize moved freely through the station. What struck her most was how normal everyone seemed, not like criminals or outcasts, but like people who had simply chosen to live on their own terms. "Kai Brennan, you beautiful disaster," a voice boomed from ahead of them. A massive Versarian woman approached, her bear-like features split in a huge grin. She was nearly as tall as Zara, but twice as broad, with intricate tattoos covering her arms and the traditional braided mane of her people. "Freya," Kai said warmly, accepting her bone-crushing hug. "Thanks for seeing us on short notice. Are you kidding? After what you did for my daughter, you could ask me to steal a moon, and I'd find a way." Freya's small black eyes fixed on Zara. "And you must be the engineer who's got the NRAS panties in a twist." "That's me," Zara said, unsure of the proper protocol for greeting an Versarian pirate queen. "I like her," Freya announced to Kai. "She's got spine. Come on, both of you. We've got work to do." Freya led them to her operations center, a high-tech command room that wouldn't have looked out of place on a military vessel. Holographic displays showed ship movements, communication intercepts, and what looked like detailed files on NRA operations. "Here's the situation," Freya began, activating a three-dimensional map of local space. "The NRA has dispatched a retrieval team, 3 ships, all armed, all carrying legal authority to arrest any Nexarian woman they deem non-compliant." Zara's stomach tightened. "How long do we have?" "They'll reach this sector in 5 days. But here's the interesting part. I've been monitoring their communications, and they're not just looking for you. They've got orders to collect 17 other Nexarian women who've gone missing from their genetic monitoring programs." 17. Zara was stunned. "I thought I was the only one who'd run." "Apparently, their little breeding program isn't as popular as they'd like people to believe," Freya said with satisfaction. "Which gives us leverage over the next several hours." Freya outlined her plan. It was audacious, risky, and completely illegal by the standards of at least 6 different governments. It was also brilliant. "We're going to expose them," Freya explained. "The NRAS power comes from secrecy and the assumption that no one will challenge their authority. But if we can document their methods, get testimony from the women they've pursued, and broadcast it across the communication networks, we turn them from enforcers into criminals. Kai finished. Exactly. And the best part is, we've got allies. 3 of the women they're hunting are already here on Haven Station. 2 more are on their way. If we can coordinate with the others, we make this bigger than just my case, Zara said, understanding dawning. We make it about systematic oppression. Now you're getting it. Freya grinned. But I need to know, are you two ready for this? Because once we start, there's no going back. The NRA will never stop hunting you, and neither will anyone else who profits from their system. Zara looked at Kai, who took her hand without hesitation. We're ready, he said firmly. Good, because I've got a journalist friend who's been dying to break this story, and a hacker who can make sure it reaches every network in known space simultaneously. The next 4 days were a whirlwind of preparation. Zara recorded her testimony, detailing years of discrimination and the NRA's threats. She met the other Nixarian women who had fled their home world, each with a similar story of being reduced to their genetic potential rather than valued as individuals. But what moved her most was watching Kai work alongside Freya's people, coordinating the technical aspects of their plan. With the same precision he brought to ship maintenance, he never once suggested that she should consider compromise or surrender. He never treated her fight as anything less than completely valid. On the morning the NRA ships arrived in the system, Zara stood on Haven Station's observation deck, watching their approach on the tactical display. In a few hours, either they would be free or they would be fugitives for the rest of their lives. Second thoughts? Kai asked, joining her at the viewport. None, Zara replied. For the first time in my life, I'm fighting for something instead of running from it. Even if we lose, Zara turned to face him fully. Kai, before I met you, I thought there was something wrong with me. I thought I was too big, too difficult, too much trouble to love. You changed that. You didn't just accept me as I am. You made me realize that I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be. You did the same for me, Kai said softly. I was so busy running from my past that I forgot how to build a future. Well, Zara said, standing on her toes to kiss him, let's go build one together. 3 hours later, as broadcasts of their evidence flooded communication networks across 12 star systems, and as the NRA ships retreated in the face of public outrage and legal challenges, Zara realized that love really had changed everything. Not just her life, but the lives of countless other women who would never again have to choose between freedom and belonging. And as Kai spun her round in celebration, her feet lifting completely off the ground, Zara finally understood what it meant to be exactly the right size for the person who truly loved her.